Awesome. All righty. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another workshop of our innovation series. We're excited to have you join us for this workshop on OKRs and ultimately driving your focus and alignment and engagement. We're excited to have Ben Lamorte, the author of the OKRs Field Book and then president of OKRs.com. And we're really excited to have him in this space. But for those of you that don't know me or the Carlson Center, my name's Cameron Law. I serve as the executive director of the Carlson Center. We're here as a resource to support founders and really with this mission to make the greater Sacramento region a premier hub for innovation and entrepreneurship, and really trying to build this region into being a premier hub for innovation and entrepreneurship. So we know some of you aren't in the region, but we are excited to serve as a platform supporting founders across their entrepreneurial journey and giving them the tools and frameworks to help them succeed and ultimately scale their ventures accordingly. And so we were excited to bring this innovation series, and we have Brian Gladden, who's one of our entrepreneurs in residence here. He'll give the wave there, and he helped create this innovation series to really give you the tools and frameworks and mindsets to help you get started and ultimately grow your business with the best proven methodologies and tools out there. And so we're excited to have this workshop today with Ben Lamorte, where we'll be diving into OKRs. And briefly, before we introduce Ben, want to share what's coming up next so we can give a quick plug. We do have additional workshops coming up. Our next one is on pirates in the Navy, where we have Tim Vicky coming in to share a little bit about how to innovate within a corporate setting and take that innovation from those spaces. We have David Bland, who will be tackling testing business ideas. And then the last two sessions of the month, we'll be diving into jobs to be done with Tony Ulwick. And then Brian will be leading a session on transforming your organization's culture. So we have a whole host of workshops running through the basically through the end of the year. We'll be sharing a link here shortly, but would love for you to plug into the rest of our workshops as well. And we're excited for you to join us today for this workshop with Ben. And I'll turn it over to Brian on our team to provide an introduction for Ben, who's here to dive into OKR. So take it away, Brian.
Thanks, Cameron. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming back. Some of the familiar faces from the last few weeks, and for those new to us, welcome and hope you come back. So introducing Ben here. So Ben is the leader in OKRs in the world. Ben has more experience in doing OKRs, deploying them, coaching them than anyone else on the planet. So Ben has written two of the leading books on OKRs. You see the one here, the OKRs Field Book, which is a guide for coaches like myself to use. And you'll see one on my bookshelf back here, which is called Objective and Key Results, that he co-authored with Paul Niven. That's one of the other main books on OKRs in the world. Ben's been doing OKRs since 2014 when he started OKRs.com. Before that, he was doing them internally in companies. In 2020, he started the OKRs.com coaching network. So OKRs.com obviously is the hub for OKRs in the world, and he's creating a coaching platform as well as a team. I myself got introduced to Ben a few years ago after looking for ways to measure and monitor innovation projects. So my doctorate is in strategy and innovation. I help companies innovate, startups get to market, create those business plans and plans to find new markets and go to, gain new blue oceans. But there is never a way to really monitor and measure those innovative projects. And so the areas I found, like balanced scorecard, weren't good enough. I found OKRs. And the more I got into it, the more I was intrigued, and this was the last piece of my journey. So now I'm an OKRs coach with Ben, one of the few on the team worldwide, and he is just the leader in this space. He has done journeys through OKRs with people like Adobe, and there's a Google type of adventures. If you look on his website, Ben will talk about the companies, but those leaders in the space, you might have heard of Christina Wadke in Radical Focus, works with her. So there's a lot of information here that Ben is going to share with you today on using these OKRs, objective and key results, to help you align and transform and really grow your business. So without further ado, Mr. Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. And I will say also welcome to the OKRs.com team. Brian has joined my team. So if anybody ever wants to do an OKRs project, and they happen to be in the Sacramento area, you're going to have the opportunity to work with me and Brian, and it'll be a lot of fun. the 5 general reasons why I see people using OKRs. They come to me and they say, hey, we want more alignment, we want more transparency, we want more visibility into what people are working on, what's the most important thing to help us focus, right? Those 2 are the big ones, but you'll also see the shorter cadence. I love how I go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And I remember I told Brian I was going to change that to 4 and 5, but the point is, there actually are 5 things. Okay, so the shorter cadence, though, is typically you'll see OKRs planning cycles in relatively short periods, maximum a year, kind of minimum 1 month, but usually the sweet spot is 3 or 4 months, right? That's what we call a cycle. And so that planning cycle is supposed to be focused on learning rather than what you might think about with an annual budget where you're trying to hit these longer term financial goals, or strategic planning, which is usually 3 to 5 years out. OKRs typically are about a quarter, maybe 4 months, maybe 6 months. So it's a relatively short cycle, and you kind of throw it out and learn and develop and then improve your OKRs over time. And if you're going to do OKRs, you need to do 2 cycles as a minimum, because really that's like 6 to 8 months typically. And that's how long it takes to kind of get the process working and really begin to benefit from it. And then I have engagement here, because workers like to see how their work contributes to the bigger picture and also to make measurable progress. If you think about what we got out of the Progress Principle, the great book published out of the Harvard Press, I don't recommend the book at all, actually. Go check out the TED Talk from the Progress Principle, really cool. But the most engaging thing, the most meaningful thing that happens when we go to work is seeing measurable progress on goals where we believe the goals are meaningful and we believe we contribute to those goals and we in fact make progress. So those 3 things have to happen. But when those things happen, you get engagement. And with OKRs, you kind of create a landscape of which to measure progress on the most important goals, and then people can see the impact they're making. And then stretch thinking just refers to, in OKRs, you typically set fairly lofty goals. This is a sensitive topic because you don't want to set such lofty goals that you'll never attain them. And also, for example, my new client, which is a big bank with 50,000 employees. Look, if you're a big bank with 50,000 employees, I don't think you should be setting lofty goals, right? You're a different culture than, let's say, a startup company where actually lofty goals do make a lot of sense. So this is all kind of some background on the kind of the general benefits of OKRs. What I see as 2 really super important things when you talk about OKRs, what do I see? I would say universal benefits that happen all the time is that OKRs are easy to understand. Okay, now before I go on, let's ask our first and only polling question, right? Which we can put in parallel to while I'm talking here. But that's going to get into, let's see, who do we have on this conversation? I mean, what best describes your use of OKRs, right? Are you thinking about adopting OKRs? Because I'm assuming that most people are here because they've at least heard of OKRs. You might know that stands for objectives and key results, for example. But are you thinking about adopting OKRs? Have you used OKRs in the past, but you're not currently using them in your company? Or are you actually using OKRs now in your organization? Or, for example, with a client organization, if you're an exterior coach? Click on the one that best describes you.
So
and while we're waiting, yeah,
we're about 60%. So we got a few more to share, and we'll
keep cranking, guys. Yeah. So the main thing is OKRs are easy to understand. Okay. And what we found is, look, at first I thought, how do we know OKRs is really working? I talked to this guy, Rick Clow. He's over at Google Ventures, and he's also got a video that you should watch if you haven't already it's like 80 minutes. I don't recommend the whole thing, but take a look at it. Google Ventures OKRs Workshop, Rick Clow. If you Google that, it'll come right up. And you can get a video that really introduced OKRs to the masses in 2014. So that's actually pretty old. But what happens is, I talked to Rick about this, and we said, well, it's not the case that if more people in your organization are using OKRs, okay, that's it. So I just got the polling results. Most of you are thinking about adopting. Some of you are, have used it in the past, but not currently. Very few of you, like 1 or 2, are probably using OKRs now. So before you adopt OKRs, okay, I want you to think, begin with the end in mind, right? Like, what is the goal of adopting OKRs? Why would you adopt OKRs? That's who I'm talking to, because that's the majority of you now. And when I talked to Rick about this, we both agreed that it's not the case that if more people in a company adopt OKRs, that's better. In fact, what we find is less OKRs in an organization tends to correlate with success, right? Less is more. So especially in a startup company, you don't want OKRs for every employee. You want OKRs for the company level and maybe a couple teams, but you probably want 3 or 4 objectives with 3 or 4 key results each. And you want to basically be able to show the OKRs on 1 or 2 slides, and that's it. Okay, this has got to be focused, right? And when that happens, and we can talk about those OKRs, it aligns us on what's the most important area to focus to move the needle. And guess what? Now we're talking in this new language about goals. Okay, because when I worked with PayPal once, they told me to come in for a goal workshop, but everybody had a different idea of what they meant by the word goal. We weren't even aligned on what that word means. Some people thought goals were 5 years out. Some people thought goals were like, be better on the phone when I answer calls. Others were like, we want to be the leader in the space. I mean, what does that even mean, right? We're talking about goals and we're not talking about SMART goals. We're just talking about goals in general. When you're using OKRs, you have this objective and you have this key result, and the terms are very clear and we all know what we're talking about. That alone can be a big win for your organization. The other thing is OKRs focuses on learning. And when I was at Stanford, I did a bunch of research here, and I didn't do the research, but I read about it. And one of the most interesting things was that organizations often claim to be learning organizations, but yet people talk past each other. In conversations, if you record the CEO dialogue with the executives in the boardroom when they're talking, you can classify statements as advocacy or inquiry. In other words, you should call Marcia. Why didn't we do this? We should invade, into the Chinese market and try to get more there, whatever. Basically, people are stating their opinions of what we should do. And advocacy is what you're going to get like 90% of the time if you were to classify these sentences. Very few of them are inquiry. And so with OKRs, I'm going to show you the definition of OKRs, but it's all about asking questions. So you're actually going to bring more inquiry in and you're going to create a learning organization. So with that, I wanted to say these are the best practices for OKRs. And by the way, a lot of what I'm showing you today is in the OKRs Field Book, which I am offering to give to some of you if you don't have it already. But the first thing is less is more. If you're going to do OKRs, may I just please recommend that you define a very small set of OKRs. To the extreme, you're going to only have one objective with 3 or 4 key results, and that's it. And that's a great idea if you can do it, right? Because less is more. You might have 2 or 3 objectives with 3 or 4 key results each. But like I said, try to keep it small. Crawl, walk, run also talks about taking it slow. So many times organizations, especially bigger organizations, usually their HR team says, oh, wow, I read this book, Measure What Matters, and I'm so excited about OKRs. Let's just roll it out. Okay, don't do that. Take it slow. I love this scale it, then nail it. This is actually a lovely type of a Freudian slip. This is what people do, but you don't want to do that. You want to nail it and then scale it, okay? And I want you to do this for 2 cycles. So whether you work with Brian or you do this on your own, commit to doing OKRs for 2 cycles. So if you do a quarterly cycle, your minimal viable OKRs program is 2 quarters. OKRs are not everything, okay? Most of the time I see people fail. Why do they fail? They just try to put all of their work into their OKRs. It sort of feels good when you do that, but it leaves you with this complete fog and lack of focus, and now what do we do? So don't do that, and I'll talk about these distinctions later. The only way to learn OKRs is to do OKRs. It's so true. So I don't want you to spend a lot of time on theory. So for example, actually a client asked me a question the other day. They said, what do I do? We have this one team, and the boss of that team is really not into OKRs, very resistant. How do we deal with that? And I said, well, don't talk to them about why they should do OKRs. Don't talk about the theory of OKRs. Don't tell them to read the OKRs Field Book. Get them on the phone and start doing OKRs with them. Start asking them these questions. What is your objective? Why is that important? How will we know you've achieved it? Make it be about them. That's what coaching is, right? Coaching is about the person you're coaching. It's not about you. That's consulting. Consulting is, let me show you all these slides. Look at how great I am. Are you convinced? Now pay me money. Coaching is really about you. And so when you find somebody that's resistant to OKRs, become their OKRs coach. Immediately they'll find value. I want to talk about these 2 things though a little bit today. I want to talk about outcomes, not output. This is one of the most important things about OKRs is that it shifts you toward an outcome mindset. A lot of people are stuck doing stuff, right? Look at how much stuff I'm doing. And then they present that to their boss, and their boss is saying, okay, fine, you're doing stuff. Actually, can you stop talking? What are we even trying to achieve? What is the outcome we're trying to get? So I learned early in my career, if you want to get promoted, lead with the outcome. Begin with the destination, pause, and then talk about how we're doing to get there. Don't just start saying, I'm doing all these, the website is looking great. We've updated the color scheme. We've got new landing pages. We've got the, if the boss doesn't really care, do we have leads, right? What is the metric? Do we have an increase in the number of visitors? What do we have here? Start with what is our goal? Then we get into, okay, the website's a different thing. How's that working? The landing pages are being updated. If those are the tactics and that's what you're living in, that's great. And embedding alignment, I'm not kidding you when I say this. A lot of organizations use OKRs to increase alignment. That's what they say they want to do. But then they write OKRs for individual teams in silos, actually only increasing silo effects. Okay, so I'll talk about that as well. I'm calling this a keynote because why not? This is today's keynote. hey, listen, this is my friend Christina who works at Stanford now, and she wrote this book, Radical Focus. Highly recommend that book too, if you can get it. Get the first version, not the second. The first version's super short. It's more for startups. The second version's trying to be Christina's attempt to write it for a larger audience. So if you're a bigger company, get the second edition. Smaller company or a startup, get the first edition. And she says, look, if you complete all your tasks, but nothing gets better, that's not success. And I've seen this happen over and over again, right? Like all the individual contributors check all the boxes. Look, I did all the work I was supposed to do. And yet the marketing department did not achieve its goal of executing on a certain number of leads. Or the sales team, everybody sort of made all these calls and did all these things, but as a sales team, we didn't hit our number. So that's not good. That's just, we did a bunch of stuff, but we didn't achieve the outcome we wanted. And a lot of people are stuck doing that. They're in a check the box mindset. I'll also challenge you who are coming to Jobs to be Done. That upcoming presentation, I think, is going to be amazing. You guys try to make that if you can, but try to find out, make a note to ask questions about how does Jobs to be Done work with output and outcomes? It's a very important distinction, because the output mindset is where you're just getting stuff done. You have a task list. And by the way, I want to preface this with, sometimes that's the right way to go. You know, you've got to get the new facility ready for the machine shop. Okay, punch list. Let's make sure this, just go through the list. Okay, is it painted? Is the equipment installed? Do we have the permit? Whatever, just go through the punch list. And sometimes that's good. But I had this happen, personal story. They told me update the blog. So that was my project. All I really knew was update the blog. So I start doing stuff. I start adding more posts. I get lists of bloggers. I connect it to Instagram, whatever I'm doing. I'm interpreting update the blog as do all these things. I don't really have a clear destination. I kind of have a feeling of we need to update the blog. I don't really know how will we know we've updated the blog. I don't know why we're updating the blog. I don't know why it's important. If you read the 7 Habits, it's like I'm climbing up a ladder. I'm going up there. I'm doing stuff. But then I'm looking around. I'm like, did I get there? What do I do now? Do I just jump off a ladder and climb another ladder? Where are we going? Okay. There's no real linkage to the big picture. I'm just being stuck on the updating the blog. One of my favorite lines is like this. I was at a grocery store the other day and I said, do you know where this is? And she said, I don't know. I work in produce. It was just really funny. It was like, I was attacking this person saying, you know where the cereal is? She's like, I don't know. I work in produce. So no understanding of the big picture. Checking boxes. Work is overwhelming. I just got this massive to-do list. I got to get all these things done. There's more things coming in. Oh my God, oh my God. Progress. How am I doing at work? I don't know. Depends on what my boss thinks. I have no way of really knowing if we're making measurable progress. I just ask my boss, how am I doing? This is a dangerous mindset to be in, but a lot of us are in there because it's not really strategic. We're not really sure if we're moving the needle. The outcome mindset, which of course I'm advocating, and this is what OKRs brings to the table. You actually start with the objective and why, right? Again, you begin with the end in mind. I'm sure you know about the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you don't, please get that book. Don't get my book. Get the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Much better. But you start with the objective, improve the digital brand awareness for Gen Z or whatever. And then you talk about why is that so important? So people understand the motivation. You educate them on why we're even doing what we're doing. Then you talk about the key result, which is how do we know we're making progress toward that objective? And here's the key result. I'm not going to read it, assume you can see it. But once we have a key result that's measurable, we then make a task plan. Right now, we know what action items to do. Look, I'm going to report blog subscriber demographics. I want to figure out, well, who's even in Gen Z? I want to run tests. I want to post 3 blogs that are, I'm thinking, focused on Gen Z readers. That's my focus here. I'm not going to just update the blog. So you're taking an outcome mindset when your team knows why that objective is important. We have the context, okay? So we're more strategic. Objectives have those measurable key results. So we're on the same page. We're aligned on what progress looks like. It's not just we did a bunch of stuff. Each key result has an action plan. So now we know what we're going to do in order to drive us toward that key result. Now that action plan is changing all the time, right? Every week we're going to cross things off the list, try this, try that. But the key result pretty much stays the same for the OKR cycle, okay? That's our destination. So I guess what are OKRs? I could almost say what is OKRs, because I want you to think of this as a verb. It's a mindset. It's an approach that you take toward work. So here's a challenge for those of you not yet adopting OKRs. I want you to adopt an OKRs mindset now, okay? You don't need to wait until your company adopts OKRs. You can adopt an OKRs mindset now, because OKRs is really a critical thinking framework, meaning it's about asking questions. Remember I talked about inquiry? We're trying to get more inquiry in there. It's this thing that's an ongoing discipline, meaning you're asking these questions all the time. Those are questions like I just talked about, like what is our objective? For the next 3 to 6 months, what do we want to focus on to make progress and why? How will we know we've made that progress? How are we going to measure our progress? And then what is the intended outcome of that task? Those types of questions are the OKRs questions. They're all in, you got it, the OKRs Field Book. And they're all listed in the epilogue. The epilogue of the OKRs Field Book is the first place that I've listed all of the OKRs questions. I don't think it exists anywhere except for there. And what I'm telling you is you should ask these questions. Even if you're not formally deploying OKRs, these questions are going to make a difference. And they try to get employees to work together. I emphasize this because that's what alignment's all about. That's why I like top-level OKRs for a startup and then getting different people to work on those key results together rather than writing OKRs for like every person so they're all working and dividing and conquering, which is what some people do. Because when you do that, often people are not working together. They're actually working apart. We want to make people focus their effort on measurable contributions. When we want to take a company and say, this is the focus, in order to achieve that, we have to define measurable progress so that people can know that they're moving the needle. That's what allows for the alignment. And that's what allows for us to really see that progress. Now, sometimes it's hard. This is why OKRs coaches like me and Brian are important, is we can help you define what that measurable progress looks like. Here's a sample OKR. I just wanted to show you this. Think of this as like the cake out of the oven, right? An OKR template, it doesn't have to be like this, but it probably will be something like this. So here it starts with a mission. Now, this is just a sample generic thing for a marketing team. So you have one sentence that describes the mission of the marketing team. In other words, if you're writing an OKR set for a marketing team, begin with a mission. This has nothing to do with for this quarter or next year. It's just over time. Why do we exist? Who do we serve, right? You know about missions, I assume. You don't have to have that, but we find it's useful. Then the objective will be something like that. Now, the objective is usually for a quarter. In this case here, it is a quarter. Increase the quality of leads cost effectively. Just a classic objective for a marketing team. Wouldn't be surprised if they had that same objective the next quarter, and that happens sometimes. But tell me about why. Why is this objective so important right now? And then it tells the story. Again, I won't read it. You can read it if you want. The key results are here. There's 3 of them in this case. And notice that each of these key results, it has a lot of words, but it spells out exactly what it wants to be. This first one is a baseline because it turns out they don't know the ROI of marketing. So sometimes with OKRs, especially when you're first beginning, it turns out you need to find out where we are. So before we can increase it from X to Y, right, we need to know what is X? Where are we now? So here we have a key result that's called a baseline key result. Obtain the ROI of marketing as measured by reporting the revenue per cost for 5 conferences where we spent $50,000 or more within the last year. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to find out what was the revenue that we got out of that conference from those leads. What was the total cost of that conference? And I'm going to report back the ROI. We don't know that information now, so we can't improve it. But once we have that data, then we can start talking about improving ROI, or maybe we're going to cut events, et cetera. The other one here is a metric, right? Reduce the cost per lead from whatever to whatever. That represents cost effectively. Bingo, right? So, your objective needs to be covered by your key results. The quality of leads. You'll find that often OKRs miss quality. They focus on quantity. I want you to look for a quality component to most objectives. But how do you measure the quality? Well, they figured out that if it converts to an opportunity within 6 weeks of creation, and they were measuring that, we're going to double that from 20 to 40%. That means we're getting better leads. That means the sales team is going to trust the marketing team when they say we got a lead. Don't give me garbage. A lot of times the marketing team is trying to get as many leads as they can. So now they just give a bunch of leads to the sales team, and the sales team is like, this is a bunch of garbage. And so you're creating disconnects. That's why you want to have things that keep your balance of your quality and quantity in most OKRs. So another way to think about objectives and key results, like this is the kindergarten definition. An objective is, what are we going to focus on to make progress in the near term? It's one sentence, starts with a verb, it's qualitative, it tells me why, right? So going back for a minute, the objective, one sentence, starts with a verb, plain English, tells me why. That's an objective. Now, a key result is, how do we know we've achieved the objective, right? And it could be a metric, a baseline, or a milestone. I talked already about a metric like increase from X to Y, or a baseline, figure out what X is, because we're not even measuring it. And by the way, that happens a lot when you're first starting with OKRs. I've actually seen some CEOs say, I want one baseline key result for every objective because I want to make sure we're measuring what matters. We're not just focusing in on these are the things we're measuring. Let's try to improve those. Take a step back. What should we really be measuring here to capture progress on that objective? Are we even measuring that? Key results are quantitative, right? They're measurable. They have numbers. And there's a standard way to measure progress on those. Okay, so here's what I don't want you to do, okay? Because this actually is what I've been alluding to earlier. Sometimes, even though I think OKRs are great, some people use OKRs and they actually make more like silos. They use OKRs to break alignment, even make it worse. And so this is an example of how this can happen. It's called the direct cascade. So it's when the company sets an objective and then they write key results underneath that. And then each department, okay, I can't believe I'm saying this because this is just so bad if you do this. Don't do this, right? Each department copies the company key result and says that will be my objective. And then the other department copies the key result. So department B does not care about this key result for department A. It's not mine, it's yours. I'm going to focus on this one. You're going to focus on that one. So we're actually creating like this hierarchical silos. Literally, we're building silos with our OKRs model. I don't think most people do this anymore, but some people do. And I'm just saying avoid it. What I want you to do is this, right? And by the way, what I want you to do is have conversations. That's what I'm trying to tell you here. Don't try to use OKRs as a toolkit to show and prove that you have alignment using some kind of cascading goal chart. Instead, don't copy and paste those OKRs from higher levels, right? Get teams thinking about it from themselves, thinking about what should their OKR be, and get leadership to buy in through communication. That's how you know you have alignment. So you know you have alignment when you have, okay, let me give you this example. This is a true story, right? The company had an objective to expand into mobile products. It was during the pandemic when they had to like deliver everything using Uber Eats or whatever it was. Like we had to get online, otherwise our business is at risk. So they had their 3 key results here for expanding into mobile products. The data platform team, by the way, this is a big company, so this is not a startup kind of a thing, but in this big company, the data platform team, they had a major problem, okay? Their problem was they wanted to migrate stores off of legacy databases. And the reason was they had 1,000 stores stuck on this legacy database. By the way, it was Oracle. And they had to like call people from India who were like old wise men with beards to figure out how to program this thing in Oracle. Nobody else understood it. So if something broke, they were screwed. And the CTO was really worried about this. We need to deal with this now. And so this objective really has nothing to do with mobile products, but they agreed when the data platform team presented their objective to leadership said, yeah, that's your OKR, all right. Focus on that. So they had their own key results. So notice they did not look at the key results upstairs here in the organization and say, oh, I'll choose that one. They thought for themselves. And they said, this is what our objective is. And then they aligned that through talking to leadership. And that's what the OKRs model does when it's working well. So if you're going to roll out OKRs, and this is in the field book, and it says here chapter 1, like this is OKRs basics. In fact, I'm going to tell you the reason why I finally wrote this book. I've been doing this for 10 years, right? So the first 5 years, I was kind of in the Wild West. I was just figuring things out as I go. Every now and then I was confident. Every now and then I was totally like feeling lost. By about the 5th or 6th year, I started thinking like, okay, I'm starting to see this seems to work almost all the time. Here's some areas where I don't really know what I'm doing. And these are the areas where I'm like, oh God, things go wrong when I do this. So by about year 8, I said, I now know I can write a field book because this is the thing. I'm going to write down the things I really know for sure. And one of them is this. Whenever you work on an OKRs project, if you're going to launch OKRs, if you're thinking about doing it, take the phased approach where you first do this, phase 1, deployment coaching. Then you do the training workshops, and then you do cycle coaching. And this is really what most people think of like doing OKRs. This is really where you are. Don't start here in phase 3. This is what some people do. Don't start here in training. Don't train people on OKRs. Deployment coaching is figuring out what we're going to do and why we're doing it. Once we know that, then we can do the training. Once we train them, then we can do the cycle and actually do OKRs. It's pretty common sense. But when I say deployment coaching, we need to answer these questions. We need to align on these questions, the answers to these questions with our organization, with our leadership team before we roll out OKRs. Where are we going to set OKRs? I mentioned earlier, company level only, like startup company, couple objectives with some key results, right? Well, maybe we need to do a couple teams too, but maybe not. Maybe we start with company anyway. We need to know the answer to that question, obviously, before we start with OKRs. How many will we set? Are we going to just do one OKR, one objective with a few key results, and that's it? Are we going to have multiple, et cetera? I won't go through all of these, but how long is the cycle, right? Is it going to be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever? Are we going to even allow those milestones or those baselines that I was talking about, or is everything going to have to be a metric? Sometimes people really only want metric key results. Increase this metric from X to Y. And unless there's a number, it's not a key result. But I'll tell you, in a lot of cases, it's better to have those. So anyway, you usually use, it doesn't take a lot of time, but where are we going to publish these OKRs? Are we just going to use a spreadsheet? Probably you are, right? If you're a startup company, you just use a simple tool. Anyway, these are the deployment parameters that we need to talk about before we do the training. Then my favorite one to talk about is this teams, because a lot of people make a mistake, okay? They think, oh, teams. Yeah, I looked at my org chart. We have a product team, we got an engineering team, we got HR, et cetera, right? So they think, oh, let's write OKRs for all these teams. But those are the teams. So we're going to write OKRs for each of those teams. Pause before you do that. Because if you do that, you might actually enhance silo effects, right? The product team might go and work in their corner. Human resources might go work in their corner. Sales team might go work in their corner. Often you'll combine teams. Like, for example, sales and marketing, they work closely together. Let's have them write OKRs together, called the sales and marketing OKRs. Or product and engineering, let's have them write OKRs together, right? Another way to do it is the model of squads. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. This is happening more and more. Pods or squads, which are cross-functional teams. I've seen like an online company that was dealing with like a classified thing, sort of like an eBay. So they had the buyer squad because the buyers were one customer segment. The sellers were one customer segment. Auto was a big deal, so they made that one. So they organized by squads. This works nicely for OKRs. So if you're going to write OKRs for squads, you're in pretty good shape because they're inherently cross-functional. So be careful when you're designing the quote teams for OKRs, not to just copy and paste your org chart. It might work to copy and paste your org chart. I'm just saying I've never seen it work. Okay, so that means it probably won't because I've worked with like hundreds of organizations. The roles, again, if you want to look about what the roles are in OKRs project, I'm going to recommend the field book, but the project lead is basically the person inside the organization who's driving the OKRs program. They know the ins and outs. They're probably doing the training. But you don't want the OKRs project team to only be HR people. I've seen this happen where it's like, then the organization thinks, oh, this is an HR initiative. It should not be an HR initiative. This should be like a top level CEO or, executive led initiative or, but it could be from various teams. It should also not be a finance thing like, oh, finance is making us do OKRs or ops. So get 2 or 3 people to be the project leads and get them from multiple areas. All right. The key result champion. In my early days, I sometimes saw organizations using OKRs where at the end of each key result, actually, let me go back to this. If you look carefully, and I'm sure you did, you notice I had a name like Vince or Gordon, Jennifer, or Alex. Those are the key result champions. So in my early days, they did not put names next to key results. The team wrote their OKRs and they just sort of hoped that they would happen. And it was sort of assumed that the team lead or the CEO was sort of accountable for this key result. Not a good idea. You want to get individual people's names next to the key result so that they can be the person who speaks up at the meetings. Like, okay, let me give you the update, right? It's pretty common sense. But this key result champion should have 1 name, possibly 2. If you want accountability, they say just put 1 name, like that's the person who's accountable, period. I find that actually defining 2 champions from different functional areas helps to drive alignment, especially for the top level key results, right? Top level key results are by definition cross-functional, right? So you want 1 person from sales, 1 from marketing, or 1 person from product, 1 person from engineering, 1 person from HR, 1 person from finance, whatever. But that focuses those 2 people to make sure those departments are kind of on the same page before they update the leadership team. It really works well. I'm going to give you an example of what I saw happen. I had a client where they literally had 2 floors in their building. This is back in the days of when people went to work. On the upstairs, we had the business team. And on the downstairs, we had like the tech team, IT and all that, all the programmers, et cetera. So the executive team wanted to use OKRs to create more alignment because the CEO basically felt like every time I ask a question, I get 2 answers. I get the answer from business and I get the answer from tech. They're never on the same page. I tell you what, the solution was so simple. We had 1 key result champion for every key result for the company key results. We had 1 business person and 1 tech person. That forced them, 1 person from upstairs, 1 person from downstairs, to talk before they talked to the CEO. It forced them to get on the same page. So simple of an intervention, and yet it made a tremendous change for them. So OKRs can be used to make cultural changes very easily, but you do it in baby steps, okay? So this was just writing top-level company key results and demanding that each key result has 1 business and 1 tech person. Boom, it worked. Got people on the same page. So as far as training workshops, when you do a training workshop in an organization, try to get people from across the organization. In my early days, I would be like, okay, we're going to do 5 training workshops, 1 with sales, 1 with marketing, 1 with IT, and 1 with engineering or something like that. Or we'll do 1 training for this squad and 1 training for that squad, and we would do them separately. Actually, it's better to bring people together from various groups and do that training. So you maybe bring 3 people from marketing, 3 from sales, whatever, and do a training workshop and have them present OKRs as they're drafting it. So they're seeing the process collaboratively as opposed to working in silos. And if you do breakouts, like if you say, hey, we're going to put you three in one group, you three in one group, whatever, don't take the three people from sales, throw them over there, the three, they already work together. Mix it up. Often they'll tell me that that was the best part of the workshop. Oh my God, I'm in sales. I talk to people in engineering. I'm kind of understanding what's going on over there. That builds cultural chemistry. It's amazing how much value they get by doing that. It also forces them to talk in a way that's more understandable, right? So the engineering people have to explain things in a way that a salesperson understands, as opposed to, the AWP of the ASW should be 5, percentage points to the left. I mean, what does that even mean? Speak English. The naive coach. So if you're a finance person and you're coaching an engineering person in a sample breakout, you can ask, well, what is AWS? What are you even talking about? Can you explain? Can you spell that out? Or what is test code coverage? Why is test code coverage important? Engineers have to say, well, actually, let's see, test code coverage is this. It's important because of this, whatever. It forces them to have a dialogue. I want you to think about the top level key results that we write, or the top level OKRs. Most of them should be cross-functional. I think I mentioned that earlier, right? The company level, it should be cross-functional. Here's bad. I'm going to show you bad and better. Again, based on a true story, I saw 4 objectives in a company. The first one was basically achieve the sales goals. And in the company meeting, the CEO presents this. All the sales and marketing people are like paying attention because, oh, this is our objective. And then it's be a great place to work objective. And the HR team takes over. Sales, everybody else checks out. Let's see, HR is going to do their thing. I don't care. It's not that's, oh, I'm up. Engineering product, it's my turn to talk. Everybody else checks their phone. Engineering product, people are paying attention. I'm telling you, this is the wrong way to do OKRs, because you're using OKRs to actually reinforce silo effects. You have to be very careful here, because it's not like these people were stupid. These were like McKinsey consultants and stuff that wrote their OKRs this way. But the unintended consequences were that they created more silos. So what you want is less objectives that are notice here. They involve multiple teams, like improve customer retention. And we're going to get multiple teams thinking about how to do that. Successfully move to the cloud. We're going to migrate to the cloud. We're going to have multiple teams thinking about how to do that. Now you're poised for success. Now you're poised to get more alignment, get people working together. So it's very important that you realize there's some subtleties here, but a lot of people are doing OKRs and it's actually not helping. You've got to take this alignment approach if you want OKRs to work. All right. Notice here's a template. You want to create some kind of a template for drafting OKRs. You can use this one from the field book or create your own. But how is this alignment embedded into each step? Well, we have this alignment check, right? We actually take a team and say, well, who are we dependent on? Who depends on us? Let's think about that before we write our OKRs, because sometimes we need to bring those people into the room. Maybe we don't have the right people here yet. And I would talk about why. So anyway, get a template. I know I'm kind of going fast, but that's because I'm moving to the place where I wanted to get some Q&A. So I'll just say, thank you so much. Listen, there's only one Ben Lamorte. I have a funny name, okay? Sorry, Daniel Jordan, I see you there. But of course, you have a good final name, Ayanu or whatever. You're going to be maybe the only one. But I'm going to say I'm probably the only Ben Lamorte. If you Google me, you'll find me. You can link in with me. You can email me. Listen, I told you already. I do want to get the book out there. So if you don't have it yet and you're really thinking about doing OKRs, this is probably the second book you want on OKRs. It's a little bit more advanced. But if you're really going to do OKRs, you really need this book. So email me, ben@okrs.com, and just say, send me a free copy. I'll do it. But you got to give me your address. that would help, right? Otherwise, how am I going to send you the book? Fine print, the catch, right? If you do request a book, please read it. Don't just say, I'm going to try to take advantage of this free offer and get my free book. Look, nobody wants this thing. If you're going to read it, it looks like this. It's about 150 pages. It's doable. But I'm asking you to read it and post a review on Amazon, because that really helps me, because my publisher is on my back telling me you need more reviews on Amazon. And what I'm finding is, unless I tell people to write reviews on Amazon, pretty much nobody does. So that's my new pitch to get you to do that. So let's go into any questions through the chat. I don't know if you want to moderate that, or how do we want to play this out?
I will moderate. Absolutely. So let's see what we got. Any questions in the chat? If you have something, you can raise your hand.
We'd love to hear from you if you're using OKRs. I mean, it'd be really interesting to get your reactions to what you just saw and any questions from you, because I know there's only a couple of you that are using OKRs, but let's maybe hear from you and just get some feedback if you are using OKRs.
I'm using OKRs. I'm really novice, and but I think it's important, something you said a long time ago, that use it as best you can, you
Right.
know.
Yeah, use it
Because
as best you can, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. And go on.
because a lot of us are in different stages and not in big companies and all that stuff. But the principle is so strong that it helps wherever you are. So I want to encourage everybody, give it a try. Really, it's far out.
Yeah, thanks, June. Yeah, I think it's a very important point to make. And you heard me allude to this earlier. I really want to challenge you, okay? Even if you don't use OKRs formally in your organization, what I'm realizing is that it's like, for example, I'm working with a big bank. I think it's like Bank of America, it doesn't matter, but some big bank like that. And they're not going to adopt OKRs because let's face it, they already have so many things that they've adopted. They don't want to create new acronyms and things for them to learn. But yet, they found that I trained a bunch of their leaders on these OKRs questions and their like level 2 managers and stuff. They found that to be incredibly valuable because it allows them to just take a better approach toward their work. So I really do want to challenge you to ask those questions that are in the OKRs Field Book. That's where the epilogue is. I saw that question pop up. And we'll probably send you a PDF preview of the Field Book as well. But these questions will help you to stay more focused, to help you to stay more aligned. And you'll find that people when you ask these questions to other people, they're really going to find that valuable because they need to reflect on, yeah, why are we doing what we're doing? How will we know we're making a difference? Like, oh, I never really thought about that. I'm posting all these blogs. I'm so busy. Is it better to post 10 blogs or one really good blog? And what would a really good blog look like? How would we know it was really impactful? Those are kinds of questions that people are really going to benefit from you asking as you coach your staff. Yeah. Anyone else using OKRs? Kind of curious.
There's a comment here from Sarah talking about organizational perspective, and if exec teams are using it and want other employees and departments to jump on board, that critical to follow effective change management and communications and along the way. So just really a statement more than a question, but
yeah, let me react to that. That's actually a really important point. Look, the good news is, if, in this case here, if the executive team is using OKRs, right, and so you have top level OKRs, most likely they're going to present that. They should, because OKRs should be transparent. They should present those OKRs to the larger organization. So in other words, they're showing you, instead of saying, hey, we're going to try to be a marketing first organization, and we're going to try to achieve amazing marketing results, and we're going to do better newsletters and stuff like that. I don't know what you're talking about. That's like hand waving leadership. But if you say, hey, we're going to be a marketing first organization, here's why, because our competitors, blah, blah, blah. And here's how we know. We're going to have 2,000 new leads in our system by the end of the quarter. We're going to have whatever it is. Now we have these measurable statements that I can update you on as a leadership team. And you as employees can kind of see to hold the executive team accountable for what they're saying, as opposed to we're doing good. So that's the first part. So from a change management perspective, leadership needs to present OKRs and share that to the lower level part of the organization. The second part is leadership should not shove it down the throat of all the people, meaning that now you have to write OKRs. OKRs should be an opt-in because some teams will find value and some teams won't. So when teams get to write OKRs themselves and develop OKRs, which are not copied and pasted from higher level key results, but rather thinking for themselves, they usually find that valuable. So as long as they opt in to do it, and then they write their own OKRs, as opposed to being told, here's your objective, right? Like a mandate, then you're going to have a better experience from a change management perspective.
Another great question here from Sarah Ben. So, Sarah, I'll read it for you unless you want to talk, but question on not meeting results. How should that be discussed ideally? And rather than simply just revising the result, people not doing, a deep dive and autopsy. So maybe you can talk about retro scoring the proper way.
Yeah. So first of all, it's very important when you write a key result to know, is it a commit level? Is it a stretch level? Is it a target level? Rather than just writing a bunch of key results. And your organization needs to figure that out. That's one of those deployment parameters. So for example, in the radical focus method, every key result is written as a 50% shot. So it's like realistic but attainable, right in that sweet spot of 50% confident to be achieved. In the measure what matters model, you differentiate between a commit key result, which has to happen. It's going to happen. It's like, we're committing to this. It's going to be very realistic. We're 90% likely that that's going to happen. and an aspirational key result, which is more like 10% likely, probably not going to happen, but we throw it out there. Wouldn't it be amazing if it happened? And even if we could get 70% of the way there, we're going to be really happy. So you have to differentiate those and figure out your model. That's the first point. And then the second point is at the end of the cycle, talking about learning. Did we achieve the stretch level? Did we achieve the commit level? What was our blocker? How can we write this key result differently? Let's make sure we get together, understand what did we learn, what's working, what's not working. How do we modify this key result going forward so it's more realistic? Or if we blow this thing out, how do we modify this key result so it's like more of a stretch, right? So we see if we can really push our thinking there. The other thing I'll point out is that the next question, I'm just popping over to it, is the OKRs versus KPIs. I actually have an office hour that I did with Quantive, and I'm going to put the link in the chat if I can quickly find it. And it talks all about just this, OKR versus KPIs, and it's a pretty good presentation. I think you can watch it, and it's you have free access to it. It is going to be, yeah, I'll send you this link. We'll send it to you in the follow-up.
Yep, we'll
email.
get it.
But I guess in summary, look, I didn't touch on that, but it's a really good question. In summary, right? Everybody's using KPIs whether you want to or not. KPIs are your key performance indicators. Like, revenue is a KPI, right? So you have it. You don't get to decide, we don't have KPIs. It doesn't make any sense. But if you do OKRs, it doesn't mean, oh, now that we're doing OKRs, okay, now we don't have KPIs. You always still have those KPIs. And a lot of times your KPIs are what we call in a healthy range. So you're monitoring the number of visitors to your website. You want it to be over 500 a month. As long as you're over 500 a month, you're happy, you're tracking, you're monitoring it, but it's not your key result because you're not trying to like double it from 500 to 1,000. If you are trying to double it from 500 to 1,000, then that KPI becomes a key result. It's the focus for improvement now. So a lot of times organizations have lots and lots of KPIs that they're monitoring, but OKRs are the ones where we're focused on improvement now. And that's a good way to think about the distinction between those. Also, KPIs are going to be monitored right for the long haul. You might have a dashboard over the next 5 years where you're going to track those. Key results are a small subset of where we're focused on improvement now.
Ben, I'm going to jump in here and add on this because I hear this a lot too, even before I joined with you. And by definition, for the rest of you out there, KPIs are leading and lagging indicators. That's all they are. They are, to Ben's point, they are not the result or the objective. They are just indicators. They are used with OKRs, not in separate. Just they're not something at odds with each other. So when you are talking to people, say we already got KPIs, and I hear this a lot. Like, great, that's perfect. You can integrate those because they have nothing to do with your objective or key result. Those are just leading, lagging indicators.
Bingo. And I'm so excited that I was able to find the link. I put it in the chat. You can see it there now. We'll probably shoot it off in the follow-up email, but that is going to cover how to score OKRs and update progress, how OKRs relate to performance reviews, and how OKRs and KPIs compare. So if you're going to launch OKRs, I would recommend check that video out. Again, it's free because that gets into like chapter 3 chapter 3 of the OKRs Field Book, which it will not be in your PDF preview. But you're going to see the movie version of chapter 3 of the Field Book, or at least part of it.
Let me get to Samita. She had her hand up for a while. So Samita, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben and Brian. Yeah, my question is, so you talked about letting it run for 2 cycles, 3 to 4 months, 2 quarters, essentially, and then reevaluating. That's my understanding. So what do you see as like, is it usually, do organizations end up redoing the actual objectives, or more so the results, or and how do you, going back to that change management, how do you manage that? What do we need to anticipate? Like, what are some indicators like, oh, we really need to reevaluate this objective, not the results themselves? Like, we're not getting results, but maybe it's the objective that we set. Yeah,
I mean, look, in the first cycle, you're going to come up with your best guess of what your objectives should be, and it should be strategic. And you probably can get the leadership team, especially if you're doing top level. That's a good exercise just for them to do, right? So they're going to come up with like, these are the 2 or 3 objectives that we want to focus on. Here's why it's important. So that's a good exercise every time. Here are the key results, right? Usually in that second cycle, right before you get into the second cycle, you're going to do what I call a reflect and reset. So that's where you look back and you say, for this key result, how did we do? Did we achieve it? Did we keep, modify, or remove it, and all that? Now, most key results will be changed. Either they'll be thrown out or they'll be updated in some way. Some of them will be copied and pasted. into that next quarter. However, most objectives will actually stay the same, at least at the company level. If you did it right, like if you were right about your objectives and it feels like, yeah, this is a good objective, we need it, you're going to see that most of your objectives are pretty much copied and pasted, maybe slightly tweaked, and then your key results mostly changed. That second cycle should be easier than the first cycle because you probably have a pretty good idea of what your objectives are going into it. And because you're sort of tweaking your key results, you have some initial starting point for what the key results should look like into that next cycle. And so now you're kind of getting good at OKRs. That's why I really want you to do that second cycle, because the first cycle, you're going to have that change management perspective of, we had a couple steps forward, we have a couple steps backward. This is kind of confusing because you might even realize after the first cycle, when it ends, you're going to be like, what? The first cycle is ending? We're not ready to write OKRs for the second cycle. 3 months is not right. Let's do 6 month cycle. So you're going to now change your deployment parameter. Or you might say, what? We wrote our key results as 50% confident and we achieved 0 of our key results? We're doing this wrong. You know, we had 10 key results. They're all 50% confident. We achieved 0. We were writing key results that were way too high. They were too stretch. Maybe we should write only commit key results this next cycle and write key results that we know we can achieve. And let's at least achieve half of them. I mean, if we can't do that, this model isn't going to work. So you want to go back and revisit those deployment parameters at the end of that first cycle and make sure you're doing it in such a way that makes sense. A lot of times people will say, oh, how did we do on that key result? 90% customer satisfaction. I don't know. Why? We're not measuring customer satisfaction. So I can't answer that. Oh, well, then let's throw that key result out and let's make the key result be a baseline. By the end of this next quarter, let's know what our customer satisfaction is with 100 customers in our denominator, so we have a valid sample size. And now we can at least make progress on that, right? As opposed to trying to set goals for things that we don't even know where we are. We can't increase it from X to Y if we don't know what X is. So that conversation at the end of the first cycle is really important. We actually recommend that you work with a coach, and at least in a lightweight format for that first cycle, because then we can help you in going into that second cycle. We recommend that. However, it's not required. So for example, you can do it yourself with the field book, that first cycle. And then after that, in fact, this can work better if you don't have a lot of money, let's say. Do the first cycle, do it yourself, and then decide if you need an OKRs coach, because now, especially if you're using the field book model, somebody like me or Brian, in that second cycle, we can quickly use this language and say, let me see your deployment parameters. Okay, what's working, what's not working? Let me look at your key results. What was your cycle time? Okay, this. Let me see your objective. How many? Oh, you have too much description for your why. There's like a page. It should be like 3 or 4 bullet points. Nobody can follow you. You know, so we can start to give you feedback so that your next cycle is a success. Because what we found is after the second cycle of OKRs, if you're not seeing like value, if the leadership team isn't totally saying, oh yeah, we're doing this, if it's kind of like, I don't know, that means it's probably not going to work. 2 cycles is all you usually need. And I would say you maybe give it a 3rd cycle, but that's the old 3 strikes, you're out. If you're giving this a 3rd cycle and you're not getting a unanimous, obviously we need this, that means OKRs aren't going to work. You just don't get more time than that. That's why I also like the crawl, walk, run though. Take a small set. Sometimes the leadership team will say, we don't want to do OKRs for our company. We want your team, we want product and engineering to do OKRs first, just them at their level, right? And so that's a really good model too. In other words, pick a small group of the organization to do OKRs rather than trying to cast it around the entire organization out of the box.
Great questions. Let's see, any other questions we have out here? Do you see a difference between how entrepreneurs use the OKRs and, managers within companies?
I absolutely do. I think entrepreneurs tend to think stretch goals. They tend to get my point about, well, let me answer it this way. Effective entrepreneurs, that's my conditional statement before entrepreneurs, because a lot of entrepreneurs are just these crazy people, right? If you read the effort myth, they're not entrepreneurs, okay? They're mythological entrepreneurs. They're trying to take their ideas and, they're developing, but they have no business sense at all, right? They're working in their business, not on their business. Anyway, that's a great book, the entrepreneur myth. Maybe the E-myth. We'll send you that link too, with Michael Gerber. But anyway, a lot of entrepreneurs who are effective entrepreneurs, they're going to write one OKR. They're going to say, here are the key results, super focused. Here's why it's important. And they're going to tell the story to their business so that we all understand how to move the needle. And that's going to set the stage for success. And that's really important if you're an effective entrepreneur. Often, if you're a manager, it's harder to do OKRs. Like I can't just say write one OKR, because a lot of managers, they feel like they're trying to deal with all these things, team dynamics. They're trying to make everybody happy, make sure everybody sees how their work contributes to their OKRs. And they're going to try to manage using OKRs to get all this work in there, and they're going to have a hard time. So with managers who are effective, they also need to try to slow down on the number of OKRs, and they need to distinguish between here's the action plan versus here's the outcome. So in other words, entrepreneurs should really focus on outcomes, and it should be a little bit easier for them, to be honest with you, because it's like high level, this is the outcome we want. Managers are often lost in projects. You know, they have all these initiatives, they got to get all this stuff done. It's more difficult, I believe, for managers to use OKRs effectively, but nonetheless, you can always be effective as long as you go back to those questions, right? And I've got those questions. If you ask those questions, it will always keep you on track. And that's really what I want you to think about. That's like the takeaway from today. When in doubt, go back to the fundamentals of asking these OKRs questions. And by the way, those OKRs questions, they're not about deployment parameters. They're not about training workshops or that. It's not about the structure of your OKRs process. It's just stuff you can ask right away. Yes, the E-Myth Revisited is a book that you can look at. And I think if you listen to that on Audible or Scribed, I think it's free on Scribed, Michael Gerber, you can Google, and we'll send you a link to that. If you're in a startup situation and you're in a services business, this is a must read book, and you got to get familiar with this because it's all about the exit strategy. Basically, what he's saying is begin with the end in mind, right? Like if you're a services business, you got to sell that thing at some point. You can't make it be dependent on you. I don't think that the Michael Gerber E-Myth thing is so useful if you're a product business. If you're a product business, you know, you're gonna have a big multiple. You can have a different kind of an exit strategy model. Okay, well, listen, I know we're out of time. Thank you so much, everybody. And remember, ben@okrs.com if anybody wants to stay in touch that way, and I can get you a copy of the field book. Great questions, and we'll send a follow-up email with some stuff.
So I would like to say thank you. We can all give Ben the clap, the Zoom wave, thumbs up, say very much appreciated.
Thanks.
Thanks for your time. And for those of you who got the Ben at OKR, send him a note. I know Alicia wanted a book, so send that over to Ben. And the rest of you, we hope that Cameron and we see you here in the next, several weeks coming up, whether it's jobs to be done, David Bland testing ideas next week.
Or the great Brian Gladden on.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Next week, or the week after, Tendai, Vicky, part of the Strategizer team, will be here. And so we've got some heavy hitters between Ben and Dave and Bland and Tendai. So Tony Olwick, join us soon. And Cameron put all the links in there for you guys to register. And we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ben.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you all.